Tiffany.
And I'm Rihanna, and welcome back to Fresh Off the Broke.
Fresh Off the Broke is about personal experiences growing up Asian American in a predominantly white community, Asian media, and Asian pop culture in general. Race has always been a sensitive topic. Every day, there are debates over race. With our podcast, we intend to shed light on the experiences of first-generation Asian immigrants, not put them on a pedestal.
We understand that race isn't everything, but there should be an acknowledgement of people of color, the knowledge gap, and the racial divide that will ideally be broken. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the episode. Today we'll be discussing toxic masculinity. Now, Tiffany and I identify as cisgender women, so we cannot wholeheartedly provide insightful commentary on this topic. So, we invited some friends to talk with us. Can you guys please introduce yourselves?
I'm Mike Tran, and I'm the creator behind the Asian Menswear brand, which basically showcases positive Asian representation. And I guess I'm here today to talk about toxic masculinity with you guys.
I'm Ricky. I am the creator of the Gay Narratives podcast, and I am a gay Asian male immigrant. So I check a lot of boxes when it comes to the minority categories. But the reason why I'm here is because, toxic masculinity in general is kind of a hot topic for me as I grew up trying to navigate through my personal identity, whether it was cultural or just me being a gay man, and trying to figure that out. So I'm here to share my experiences and my story, and hopefully to help inspire other people to do the same also. And that's what Gay Narratives is all about.
Ricky, you kind of touched on this, but do you guys want to talk about how your podcast / account came to be, like how it progressed to where it is today?
So for me, Asian Menswear has been sort of like this evolution to where it's at today. And it started off with basically, I think it was back in like 2018. And I was just basically looking for outfit inspirations. And the way that I would do it is I would go on Instagram and I'll find, guys that whatever guys in their fashion. And then I started to notice there wasn't a lot of Asian guys. And I was wondering why that was. I was like, why is there just, white, black, Hispanic, but there was no Asian guys that I could see, so that if I see them wearing something, it would be nicer for me to have someone that looked like me wearing the things that I might like to wear as well. So then what I did was I just decided, hey, let me just create an account that features only Asian males and then kind of showcasing their fashion. And then through Asian Menswear, I kind of discovered all these other kind of issues that was more than just fashion, right? It was about the lack of representation. It was about not having a lot of confidence because of not knowing our identity, I guess. And then that's when I started to really promote not just fashion, but accomplishments, things that all of us Asian guys or the Asian community can be proud of. And I think through that, I believe was the best way to help build confidence within our community. And then that's kind of what's led to what Asian Menswear is today. And essentially we have a podcast now, which I think is about showcasing the stories of the average Asian man, and then in hopes of inspiring the next generation, since they have pretty much the blueprint. I'm hoping that my guests' stories will resonate with the listeners. And if they can see, his upbringing was kind of like mine, he was able to do all these things, then I hope that the listeners can go and essentially motivate themselves and empower themselves to do the same thing. So that's kind of where Asian Menswear is at today.
Thank you for sharing your story. I had a question about the name Asian Menswear. So is there a particular reason why you decided to keep the name Asian Menswear after pivoting to include like different narratives outside of fashion?
Yeah, so I've been kind of bouncing around the idea of changing the name. I've asked a lot of people about it, just because I know if you look at it from the surface level, you'll think it's all about fashion, but it's not. Asian Menswear to me was kind of like, again, since it started off as a fashion thing, I think almost in a way the name Asian Menswear is kind of like, with fashion, everyone is different, like everyone has a different fashion. Everyone has a different lifestyle. Everyone is different in a lot of ways. And I think being an Asian man, there's kind of like that stereotypical profile of an Asian man. But in reality, there's so many different Asian guys doing different things. And I think Asian menswear is almost kind of like, it still kind of fits into what I'm doing now, I guess. It's like having a variety of clothing is also having a variety of Asian men doing different things. So I think that's the reason why I ended up keeping it. And just because so many people know about Asian menswear now is another reason why I decided just to keep the name.
Mhm. Thank you.
Mhm.
Perfect. So, Ricky, do you want to explain how your podcast came to be?
Sure. I think what a lot of what Mike just said just really resonates too. Of course, me being an Asian man, and I'm huge on fashion too. I think it's definitely a form of self-expression that, it's a huge variety of ways that you can do that, and I think that's awesome that you're doing that. And um, similar to what Mike was sharing, right? Growing up, I looked for role models and to see, online and just around my life on TV and things that where I could see someone that represented me, whether it was from the Asian male perspective or from a gay person's perspective. And I found it difficult to really identify with anybody that I saw. One, because there was just a lack in general, and two, because a lot of those were heavily stereotyped. And so as a result, I kind of grew up learning to hide parts of myself. And I grew up not knowing how to be proud and confident in myself. And so all the years that I took to basically come to learn about who I authentically was as a person, as a gay Asian man, and to fast forward to today where I'm able to stand here and be proud of who I am, I think it was a long journey. And that's where gay narratives came from. I always knew that there was something missing. I just didn't know what form it would take. And I've always been a writer at heart. And so I always introspectively journaled and wrote articles and just memories. And that's where Gay Narratives podcast came from, because I realized that by being vulnerable and sharing moments that shaped my life, my goal and hope is that that would inspire other people to do that. And the more I share, the more I hear from other people who have similar stories and experiences in their own unique way, the more that I found that I was able to form deeper and more meaningful connections with myself as I continue to grow and evolve, but also with other people. And I think that feeling of community and that feeling of being seen and being heard and being able to help have a platform to amplify other people's voices really, really is what Gay Narratives is. And it keeps me passionate, and it allows me to still pour a lot of love and energy into it, even though I do still have a full-time job aside from the podcast.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really glad that you get to share these stories and also the experiences of other people now that you have your podcast. And I mean, with the two introductions that you've given, you can see that there are a lot of similarities and unique differences between how your podcast or account came to be. Now, our next question or section is really about representation of Asian men, specifically poor and inaccurate representation. So I think a good way to start would be, what is the biggest misconception or just something hugely incorrect that you always have seen about how Asian men are portrayed in the media?
It's a loaded question.
I can start with that. It's pretty, when I think of Asian men and stereotypes in mainstream media, the first thoughts that come to mind are small, frail, meek. There's typically a fake accent involved, squinty
Not the
eyes.
accent, of course.
Yeah, the accent is, especially when it's a fake accent too. It
Yes.
really, really, really irks me whenever I see that. And you see that, a lot of times. It's almost as if mainstream media portrays Asian men as a cartoon character. And that's the only way that Asian men are able to get, spots or get the spotlight or land, a deal or anything in a movie or a TV show. I think of The Hangover as an example, right?
Mhm.
When there's a scene where the trunk pops open and Ken Jeong, the actor, Asian guy, he's physically small. He pops out of the trunk fully naked, and he has this thick accent that's fake, and nobody can take him seriously. And that just sticks in my mind whenever I just think of the terrible stereotypes that are out there that make us seem like we're just fake cartoon characters that are not real.
And I mean, for us growing up, I've seen a lot of shows or sitcoms where, for example, maybe there'll be a brown character and then they would always have to have this very specific high-pitched voice as well as an accent. And like you said, they'd be portrayed as frail and very weak or socially awkward, which in turn makes it seem like all brown men or all Asian men are very awkward people that don't know how to socialize. And especially there's also the stereotype that they can't talk to women at all.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. Like I always feel like there's always a plot twist where the Asian guy somehow gets the girl at the end, even though the whole movie they've been portrayed like meek and quiet and shy and just socially awkward, and then like the whole punchline is just he gets the girl at the end, Hey.
Yeah, if he's lucky. I've seen more where the Asian guy is just the friend who's always there for the girl
Yeah.
throughout all the struggles, and then in the end she still ends up picking the douchebag.
The other dude.
That is true. Yeah.
That's so funny because that's literally, even today, it's funny because I was working with a director, and I guess he created this short film about, and it was just literally Asian guys kissing women. And when I was just different Asian guys, like he was just creating movie scenes, right? Just snippets, multiple snippets in one short film of Asian guys as the romantic lead, and he's kissing the girl. And for some reason, I felt very uncomfortable with it. And what I mean by that is because I'm not so much used to seeing Asian guys on screen being that romantic lead and kissing the girl on screen. So that just goes to show how much representation is so important, because even for me as an Asian man, I know I can be romantic. I know, I've kissed girls plenty of times, but to see it on screen was so weird to me because I've never seen it in the past. I even talked about it with the director. He said, I felt the same way and I created it. So I think that's how powerful representation is if you don't have enough of it. So that's what I'm obviously hoping for in the future, where when we do see an Asian guy and he is the the romantic lead and he's having the kiss in the film, it wouldn't feel so weird. So if it feels weird for me, you can only imagine how it feels for non-Asians. Right? And I know what's happening, but I still feel that way. So that's just, again, I don't think a lot of people think about deeply about how it affects people, but it definitely does.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because especially nowadays, there are more opportunities, or there are like more shows and movies where they might have an Asian romantic lead. But especially if we're talking about like heterosexual leads, a lot of times it ends up being, a Asian male and then a white female lead. And, there's always those memes where they say like, oh, it's going to be Henry Golding again, or it's going to be this person again, because you have like, I mean,
that's a big topic.
I love that there's representation, but at the same time, there always end up being like that one person that they're going to use now if they want Asian representation.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely something that always comes up, especially with what I do. I hear it all the time about using half or not using a full Asian that represents the majority of what Asian men look like. And I guess for me, it's just like, I think it's obviously not ideal, but it's a step in the right direction. I'm not saying we should be happy about it, but I think eventually, especially with the addition to like Simu Liu for Shang-Chi, I think people are going to start becoming, the more times you see it, the more it becomes normal. So we're definitely headed in the right direction. That's how I see it. Because in the past we didn't have any leads, right? At all, not even close. And we're in 2021. So now we're having this huge wave of well, I guess half Asian actors. At least they look Asian in some ways, right? We have I think Mortal Kombat, we had Louis Tan. He's obviously a half. We have Crazy Rich Asians, obviously Henry Golding. We have Andrew Koji for Warrior. He's also half. So it's like a lot of, it's a slow acceptance, I guess. I don't know how Ricky feels about it, but that's kind of like, I'm okay with it. I just know we still need to progress, but it's the right step in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm on the same page. I'm not gonna lie, there are parts of me where it's frustrating to see, right? Where we have to cast these half Asian to kind of ease society into seeing us on the main screen. And a part of me, felt a little bit like, oh, we're just taking what we can get, kind of thing, and taking scraps for what they are. But on the other hand, I think the if you take a step back and look at the larger picture, I agree, Mike. It's great that we are getting the visibility that we need. Although it's moving at a slow pace, it is moving in the right direction. And I think that's just human nature. I'm not naive enough to believe that overnight we can just have, full representation, full positive representation. But I think we are headed in that direction. And so I'm hopeful for that.
Kind of weird segue, but on the flip side of what we've been talking about, what do you guys feel about like the rise in K-pop fans or anime fans, and how it's kind of feeling like, I'm not sure, maybe it's just me, but it kind of feels like current media within K-pop and anime really emasculates Asian men, and just like, I don't know, I've been seeing a lot of like K-pop fans saying, oh, he's so cute, he's like a baby, and then just putting that stereotype on all of Asian men as well. What do you guys feel about that?
You want to take this one, Ricky?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to the intent for me. That makes it kind of the determining factor of how I feel. I have a wide variety of opinions, but in general, I think if people are genuinely interested in K-pop, I'm personally not, but I do see and hear a lot of what you're describing, Rihanna, where people are like getting into this mainstream K-pop thing because it's the hot topic nowadays, and saying, oh, he's so cute and stuff. I can't speak personally for those stars and how they feel, but
yeah,
I think in general, if someone is taking a genuine interest in the culture and kind of the history of where K-pop came from, and anime especially, I'm okay with that generally. I think it becomes dangerous when people, like you're kind of insinuating, where people take certain characteristics and they blanket statement and they blanket assume that, oh, all Korean guys are, in the beauty industry and they have smooth, very pale skin, they're hairless. I think that becomes dangerous when people start making those generalizations, and you see it, across the board, even when being a gay Asian man, right? There's all kinds of stereotypes where gay men are just very much portrayed as flamboyant and sissies and things like that, and they act girly, and it's very demasculating. But on the other hand, I think it's kind of awesome when I see the K-pop groups, and the guys especially, who really just own their persona. They own their masculinity in their own way. It's not a physical masculinity where they're super muscular, they have chiseled abs and stuff, but they're so confident in who they are. And I think that kind of essence and that is what attracts people. So I think it's kind of cool if you look at it on the other hand, where yes, they are not your stereotypical masculine, physical kind of men, but they own themselves and they're very fashion forward and they know who they are. And I think that's very attractive too. And that's probably what draws a lot of people into this whole K-pop scene.
Yeah, I think definitely people are trying to find that balance of cultural appreciation versus like straight up just generalizing everything, because a lot of people do try to stay educated and stay on the cultural appreciation side, but a lot of fans, like, I think there's a weird line where people cross it and then just end up like I can never say this word,
Me too, don't worry.
fetishizing
Fetishizing.
Asian men. And there's also like the weird like shipping two members of a band, or not even just doing that to a band, but then when seeing like another, let's just say like an Asian what's the word, influencer, and with his friends, and then just shipping them because ooh, two Asian guys are friends. I don't know. It's like that weird like border between fine and fetishizing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess for me, I think it's just to piggyback off Ricky here. I think it could be dangerous in the sense, again, where people start to create this fetish around Asian men because of the K-pop thing. I think that sort of becomes a problem. And then obviously, like, with the lack of like knowledge, that knowing, hey, K-pop, I hope people understand K-pop isn't Asian Americans either, you know, or like they didn't come from America, so to speak. I don't know. It's definitely a hot topic, for sure. But from what I see, it seems like people are creating this fetish around it, or some people are, obviously. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that one.
Yeah, I get what you mean, because it's like on one side, it's like I like how people are finally starting to like, you know, uplift Asians and stuff like that, and then on the other hand, it's like some people are a little taking it a little too far, you know. I don't know how I stand on it.
Yeah, I'm sensing there's a feeling of almost like protectiveness of our, you know, even if we're not Korean or anything like, and we're, you know, Asian Americans and Asian Canadians, and there's a sense of this is ours. You can't, you know, you have to be respectful of it. You can appreciate it, but there is a fine line. And I think that's a constant struggle that I have also internally whenever I see things where a non-Asian person takes interest in something that could be taken the wrong way. I kind of wince and go, oh, I hope that's coming from a good place, first and foremost.
To add on to what Rihanna was talking about earlier, I have seen videos. I imagine some of them are made to be ironic, at least I hope so. But I've seen these videos where people, for example, I imagine, have y'all seen videos of people seeing like a cute stranger on the street on TikTok or something?
Seeing what?
So sometimes on my Instagram Explore page, or just in general, I'll see video where people see a cute stranger somewhere, and then they'll be like, oh, and like post it on TikTok. And I've seen videos where people might see two quote unquote pretty Asian guys, and then they'll basically be like, oh, maybe they should be together. Oh, two pretty Asian guys, huh? And it makes me kind of uncomfortable, because one, there's like the whole pretty Asian guy thing, and then like, oh, two pretty Asian guys, they should be together because it'd be pretty, or it's a weird, almost aesthetic kind of thing.
I don't think I've seen that before, but that does sound kind of weird.
Yeah, there's also like, sorry, you go first, Ricky.
No, I was gonna say I haven't seen that, but it sounds almost like a zoo where it's like, you know, we're
Right.
animals and people are recording
Right.
and kind of just pointing and saying, "Ooh, look at that exotic looking thing."
Yeah.
Mhm.
There was
Yeah.
like this like trend, not really trend, but a surge in videos of people who would literally film like Asian families like in like Walmart or something and be like, "Oh my God, look, they're Asian." Or, "Oh my God, I heard them speaking Korean." And
Wow.
I'm not sure if you guys have seen videos like that, but there was a point like maybe a year ago, a couple years ago, like pre-pandemic, obviously, but they would literally film families just
We're
because,
Asian.
yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
I
That's
once
that's pretty
saw a
messed up.
video. It was they like very simply put, an Asian couple arguing. That was the entire video, and it was filmed from the third person perspective. Someone was on the street, and they just filmed this Asian couple fighting. And it
I'm
was
not
on
even.
an account called, I think, Asian couples or Korean couples or something like that.
That's so odd. I'm not even surprised anymore of what I hear about being posted on the internet. I mean, nowadays you can find literally anything
Hmm.
that you want. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like scary that people would do that.
And I think it kind of goes back to what Ricky was saying, how we're viewed, right? We're kind of not even human in a way, and people
Hmm.
feel they can uh like say, oh, they should be together as if we're just these things. And I think that's been the problem for all of us, how we're just sort of this thing, this foreign thing, and we're just kind of for entertainment in a way.
Mhm. Definitely.
Yeah, I think a large part of that also is I recently had a conversation with my mom about this, where there is definitely a generational thing happening where I'm an immigrant, but I moved here to the US when I was really young, but I still had instilled in me the very traditional values of, what it meant to be a Chinese person, and things like you're respectful, you don't cause waves, you keep your head down, you just work hard and do your own thing and stay out of trouble, basically. And I think that mindset has been so ingrained in a lot of even my Asian American friends who were born here, because their parents were immigrants. They still have that mindset where it's almost like we we were taught to stay quiet on issues like this, and on things like where people are talking about us as if we don't even exist, or as if we're just, animals or not humans. And we've allowed that to happen, like, I'm talking, years and years and years and many years ago. And I think that's just a behavior that people have come to see as, oh, that's normal, that's okay, because what are they going to do? But I think
Right.
there's a shift happening right now, which we're taking back that power and we're saying we're here and we have a voice. And I think that's really powerful, especially because of the broad spectrum of what Asian encompasses. It really it inspires me to hear more and more people speaking out nowadays.
That's a good point, Ricky. Yes, that's right. That's true. That's very true. I think that's the reason why people do act like that, because of the generation before and how we handle things in the past.
Mhm.
There's no repercussions. There's no consequences for if you treat this person this way. Nothing's going to happen, right? Um, yeah, I like that.
Did you guys have any role models growing up in the media?
Honestly, growing up, I did not have any role models, not like a singular person. I think for me, growing up, I had to take bits and parts of different people, but it was never an Asian person.
Hmm.
There's just a lack of, it's the reason why Asian menswear exists. There's just a lack of positive role models I could look up to, and anything that was on the news about Asian Americans was like non-existent.
That's true.
So because of that, I don't have access to anyone besides Jackie Chan. Like there was like some study recently, I forgot who's behind it, but they asked, I think it was like out of a couple thousand people, they asked if they can name a prominent Asian American,
Oh
and
yeah, I saw that.
it was like 42% said they didn't, and the rest would say Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee. And as
Mhm.
you can see, the problem with that is Jackie Chan's not even Asian American, right? He's from China.
Mhm.
And then Bruce Lee's been dead since the 60s. And so if people don't know that, how do you expect we know that, right? And that's why
Right.
I do my best now to make sure the stories of these guys doing exceptional things are there so that the younger generation can see and feel proud and know that there are other Asian guys just like them doing great things. And I think a lot of it, a lot of like confidence and things like that really comes down to feeling like you belong and also that you are having an impact as I guess as a group, as Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and whatnot. And that's why I decided to create Asian Menswear, because I grew up not having a role model, and I think if I would have felt more proud of my heritage, knowing other Asian guys, Asian people in general were doing all these things, I think I would have felt more proud of it instead of being kind of pushing my heritage away a bit, which I think a lot of people have done throughout my time with Asian Menswear and everything else. So yeah, for role models, I didn't have one growing up, but today there's so many options, so many um,
Mhm.
available options for people to kind of look up to in every category. If you're looking for athletes, if you're looking for entertainers, if you're looking for doctors, if you're looking for lawyers, whatever, CEOs, there's plenty. We just need to bring those stories up and make it accessible to people. But yeah, I guess that's my story for role models.
Thank you. And one thing I actually would like to add about Asian menswear that I really appreciate is how on your story you'll have a specific an Asian male figure, and then you'll say, "Oh, did you know about this person?" And you also, there'll be a yes or no poll, and then you can
Yeah,
see, for example, when there's very mainstream ones, it'll be 98% yes, and then 2% no. But then out of nowhere, there'll be this one person that's, of course, very, very important, but then no one knows about them, and you'll see, oh, 23% yes, and then the rest doesn't know about that
right.
person.
And that's within the Asian American community or just Asians abroad. But if you think of non-Asians, that number is going to change drastically, right?
Definitely.
So interesting to
Definitely.
see those numbers even
Mhm.
today. So that's why it's a work in progress, right? We're not exactly there yet, but we're working towards it.
Mhm. Ricky, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, Mike, that's so funny that you said Jackie Chan, because my response to the question of any role models growing up was
Jackie
first
Chan,
no role models, but then Jackie Chan came to mind. I was like, oh, there's
right?
Jackie Chan. But even if you think of Jackie Chan and his role in all the movies and things, he does have a comical character that he plays in almost every single movie that you watch him
Right.
in, where he's dramatic and he's over the top with his martial arts stunts. And I mean, he's really a he's an expert in martial arts, but I think that almost gets diminished because of the fact that he puts this comical character and personality in his roles. And I'm sure that
Right.
the directors were had an influence on that to make him more relevant and to make it more, I don't know, excitable, and more mainstream. But that's something that I was laughing while you were saying Jackie Chan, because he's the only one I can think of.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
funny because sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ricky.
no, go for it.
Because like when I try to explain what it is that I'm doing with my friends who are non-Asian, and then they don't really understand because they've lived through life with a good amount of representation, right? Whether it's black, white, or Hispanic. And then this is how I basically prove my point on why I'm doing what I do. And I asked them, I was like, okay, name me a famous Asian person. And then this is exactly what they'll say. They'll say Jackie Chan. My friends are African American. They'll say, "Oh yeah, you got Jackie Chan and Jet Li." And then I'll say, "Can you name anyone else?" He's like, "No." And then okay, there exactly. You just answered the you just answered it for me.
Yeah.
And then I'll explain to them they're from China. They don't represent Asian Americans. And if you're almost 30 and all you can name are two people, do you see the problem? And then there goes, when there's a whole conversation, and I'll name African Americans who are famous, who have a lot of impact, and I can name a lot of them. Or if it's white, I can name a lot of them, so then they start to really like, oh damn, I never really saw it that way.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
interesting. It's an interesting
that's
conversation.
That's so true. The other part also, when I think of just role models growing up, ironically, I feel like Asian women had kind of more of a foot in the door when it comes to mainstream media because, and this isn't a good thing either, but they were able to fill the roles of, the mysterious and kind of just exotic kind of check the box as far as characters in movies. So Lucy
Yeah.
Liu comes to mind in like Kill Bill or, Charlie's
Mhm.
Angels and stuff, where I saw, Lucy Liu as a role model, being a gay man. Also, I was like, oh, she's so strong and confident and she kicks ass. And even though she probably was fetishized, in her characters, in what they were, I still saw that, and she was definitely part of mainstream media. And I think that's powerful in and of itself too, where I was able to not see Asian men, but also see Asian women that were strong and powerful. And that just made me think of that when you mentioned the general lack of Asian men.
And I'm glad you brought up the thing about Asian women because actually, if we're talking about role models in general and how we've been saying, oh, the person that comes to mind is Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, a lot of the people that we're thinking of, there's also another problem in that we're just thinking of perhaps just Chinese people, and that's the extent of at least the early representation that we've seen, right?
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
And of course, we hope that as time moves forward, to not put it in a cheesy way, but we would also have representation of Asians outside of East Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of John
Definitely.
Cho. I think John Cho is Korean, right?
Yeah.
In Harold and Kumar. um, I kind of had a crush on John Cho too. So there's that's a different podcast story.
We have and Steve Yun, obviously Korean American.
Yep. Yep.
Hmm. But it's funny because a lot of people still don't know, can't distinguish between each race or culture, from Korean
Mhm.
or Chinese. And I think that's one of the things I always point out now is like, I think the older generation, we had this like infighting, right, with like, oh, you're Japanese, I can't be, blah blah blah, or you're Chinese, you're Korean. Like we have this weird competitiveness amongst each other, and I think people are starting to realize like, while we're fighting with each other, everyone else sees us as one anyway.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
And I don't think people understand that. Like if a non-Asian comes up to me, he'll think I'm Chinese, even though I'm part Chinese, but that's the extent of it, right? We're all Chinese at the end of the day. It's just a very interesting thing that I think a lot of people are awakening up to that and
Mhm.
coming together now, especially with all the Stop Asian Hate and everything going on.
Definitely. I think
Mhm.
especially with coronavirus,
Oh yeah,
within the Asian, like different Asian communities, people will be like, oh, it's the China virus. And it's like, okay, but we're living in the West and everyone sees us as
yeah,
Chinese. Like, why are we hating against each other? We're in the same boat right now.
right, literally.
But yeah, also like going back to like representation, even something that I find like as a Filipino Canadian, um, was that when I was younger, people would always be like, "Oh, did you know that this like famous person is part Filipino? This famous person is part Filipino?" And I'd be like, "Why? Why are you holding on to that so much?" And I realize now is because there aren't really any Filipino Canadian or Americans that are famous that I can think of. Like I'm for some reason I'm thinking of Bruno Mars because he's like, I don't know, is he even part
Huge.
Filipino?
Yeah, I think he's half.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because I
Hmm.
remember like people telling me
Yeah.
he's like part Filipino and be like, is he? Like I didn't even know.
Yeah, I think his mom's Filipino.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom would always like bring up someone who's like a quarter or half and I'd be like,
Mm,
why? They don't even like speak about being Filipino. Why?
right.
I can't even relate to that, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I guess concluding notes. Do you guys have any hopes for the future? Maybe advice for listeners? Anything?
I can go ahead. You're cool with that, Ricky?
Yeah, go for it.
Honestly, my hope, I'm very optimistic. I think again, like Ricky said, like, yeah, it's not as fast as we want it, but we're definitely going in the right direction. I think now I've always said this, but for us to create change, we need to do it ourselves. We need to take the initiative, you know, with Ricky and his podcast, with me and my brand with Asian Menswear, and you guys with your podcast. You know, we need to be the ones to make the change we want to see. And I think we see we see Randall Park, they're creating their own media production companies, right? Like Daniel Day Kim. These guys are, if we want Asian American stories, if we want stories that represent us, we have to be the ones that do it. And I think Daniel Day Kim and all those guys have finally built enough skin in the game to now create those lanes for us, and it's happening. And I think from now moving on, it's going to be accelerated 100%. And if those things do well, in terms of how much revenue they bring in, then other people will jump on, the non-Asians and things like that. We're going to start to see more representation all around. And I think just given what I've seen in the past couple of years, we are accelerating a lot. Like I was over at my nephew's, and he was watching a show where I think it was it was on Netflix, but I think it's a pretty big show. And the father was Korean American, and his wife was Caucasian, and they're just this family, just a regular family. And to be able to see that now, like, that's unheard of when I was growing up. So I think eventually, my hope is that eventually we won't need an Asian menswear, you know, because we're not, that issue is not going to be as prevalent. And when we see Asians, we're not going to think foreign as a whole anymore. That's my hopes. I do feel very optimistic about it in general, though. And I guess for my advice for the listeners is, don't stop working on yourself. Like, at the end of the day, like, as much as a representation can affect the way that you view yourselves and things like that, like, at the end of the day, it really comes down to you. And if you work on yourself and you do your best to be better every day, I think that leads to confidence, that leads to you being who you are, whatever that is, whatever that means for you. And I think that's just like the best way to kind of go about that. And that's pretty much all I have to say for that.
Yeah, that was beautifully said, Mike. I completely
Thank you,
agree
Ricky.
with everything that you said. I have similar hopes for the future. I truly believe what Mike just said. It starts with yourself. And I think we are much more powerful than we give ourselves credit for a lot of times. And I really feel like right now, today, we're seeing a shift finally happening with the Asian community, Asian Pacific Islander community. And I know that's a big umbrella that encompasses a lot, but I feel like for once, we are finally uniting and collectively having a voice, and not only just pushing each other aside and doing our own thing, but really, really helping to amplify one another. And I think that is so powerful, and we need to continue to push for that, because the younger generations are only going to keep learning from us. And the more they see this being a norm, the more it will become a norm. And it really, really inspires me to kind of look back on, when I grew up, it was just keep your head down. The cultural expectations, even being an Asian American myself, was to stay quiet, and it was to swallow your guilt, swallow your shame, and not speak up. And a lot of that translates to, the LGBTQ plus community also, where a lot of times we're told by society to stay in the closet. I'm no stranger to hearing terrible things, to seeing terrible things, being portrayed against the LGBTQ plus people. But I think right now I'm feeling a very similar shift of where the gay community came. And I see parallels happening with the Asian community. And I'm so hopeful, because I know that change does happen and it takes time. So my advice for listeners out there would be to definitely don't be afraid to speak up. And speaking up doesn't always have to mean you literally, speak out. You don't have to start a podcast if you don't feel comfortable yet. You can just speak up within your circles, within conversations, everyday conversations. If you see something wrong, or if you want to correct someone if they said something wrong, it's the little things that add up. And the last bit would be proud of who you are. Like what Mike said, be true to yourself and don't ever let other people dictate how you feel or tell you who you are. And that's
Well
all
said,
I
Ricky.
have.
Well said.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. And thanks to you two for joining us today. I've had an excellent time listening to both of your experiences and hearing a little bit more about how both of your accounts per se came to be, and get to hear more about what it's like on the inside. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you guys for hosting this, and I really had a lot of fun on with this conversation with you guys too, with you too, Ricky.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm very amazed and happy with technology that we were able to connect with Tiffany and Rihanna all the way in Canada. And now I have a new page that I need to check out, Asian Menswear. And I think it's great. We should continue to lift each other up and to share our stories. I think it's amazing. So thank you all.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed that call just as much as we did. We had a great time hearing their insight, especially since, as Rihanna said in the intro, we do identify as cisgender women. So it was really nice to not only center the voices of those that actually have those experiences, but as well as just be able to sit back and listen. And if you are interested in Ricky and Mike and their work, we have all their links down in the description, as well as the link to the study that Mike mentioned earlier about 42% of Americans not being able to name a single prominent Asian American. So be sure to check all that out. And also, if you're up for the challenge, I don't know why I called it a challenge, leave a comment down below about your personal experiences, anything that might have shocked you, surprised you during the episode, and maybe do some reflection down in the comments as well. We'd be happy to read any of that.
If you guys like this episode and want to stay connected with us, check out our website in the description. It contains links to our streaming platforms such as Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and more. Follow us for more behind-the-scenes content, announcements, and other random things we decide to put on there.
See you next time.